Just saying. Just saying. Learning how to operate production gear is very different than learning how production gear operates. And how it works is way more important than just knowing how to operate it. Hi, I'm Joe Scacciaferra, CEO and creator of Ferrocity. This statement will open a world of opportunities for you. And I promise learning theory isn't as complicated as it sounds. But that statement is so important, I'm going to repeat it. Learning how to operate production gear is very different than learning how gear operates. And how it works is way more important than just knowing how to operate it. Listen, I'm not a book smart guy. I have to roll up my sleeves and tinker with things until I understand how they work. I learned to write and play music, but I never learned music theory. I could take my Harley apart and put it back together, but I never really understood automotive theory. That may sound like I'm justifying it's not important to understand the theory of operations, but I'm not. Here you go. It's literally just the opposite. I wrote and played what I wanted to. I could take my Harley apart and put it back together, but every time I wanted to do something different, write a different kind of music, or work on a different bike, I'd have to start all over again, learning how all these pieces went together. It really changed when I started working with Steve DeFuria, who, by the way, is a monster keyboard player and an all-around brilliant person. The secret I'm about to share with you is what I learned and developed at that time. When Steve and I decided to collaborate on authoring books about the creative use of technology, which became the Ferrotechnology series, I had to develop a simple learning method, which meant I had to reverse engineer how I instinctively broke down complex subjects into a simple system of learning. I don't know, I just had an instinct for taking a complex thing and making it simple. Maybe I'm not smart and I just needed it simple to really grasp it. But anyway, I had to reverse engineer that, which meant I had to actually lay out the methodology of how my brain was clicking. So also, Steve and I knew that in order to address what we wanted to do, in order to keep everything valuable now and in the future, we had to hit these 3 points. And these were the only 3 points that we laid out when we started this. First, the books needed to provide a general knowledge of tech in a way that it could be applied to creating music with any new technology. Steve was a wizard at this. Second, explain complex subjects simply so anyone could understand that. That was me. And third, which is the theme of the system I'm going to explain, if you wanted to keep the mailbox money rolling in, these books better be evergreen and not based on one instrument or one technology. The third is the key. Learning the theory behind the gear is more important than learning how the gear operates. All right, let me take a little sidebar here. What really worked was Steve and I both had an appreciation and an understanding of both sides, the music application and the technology. Each of us then had a deeper understanding of one side, but a solid appreciation of the other. That collaboration worked really well. Okay, here we go. The first book was about programming synthesizers, or sound modeling as it's now called. Synthesizers were a unique musical invention that meant you needed to understand 3 things: a unique understanding of technology, the physics of sound, and how the two could be applied to creating music. Yeah, they all had black and white keys like a piano, but the rest of the instrument was pure tech, with a panel of terms that were never seen before by most musicians. Steve's idea was brilliant. Rather than show people how to tweak knobs and push buttons on a particular instrument, he was going to explain the basic components of sound. This way, you'd be able to create on all synthesizers, not just the one he was demoing. You know the phrase, give a man a fish and feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime? That was basically Steve's approach. That approach, understanding the concept rather than the unit, was always at the core of my personal method of learning. So our collaboration yielded some awesome books, and they're still relevant today, 20 years later. Why? Because they were based on those three concepts. But because of our shared abilities and shared appreciation for those abilities, our collaboration extended way beyond books. Together, we came up with dozens of awesome hacks to personalize a synthesizer for a musician, from club daters to legendary recording hours. Great story, right? But how's this all going to help you advance your career and open up new opportunities? Well, the key is here. If you only learn how to operate a piece of equipment, like a Sony F55 camera, or an Akai Pro MPC sampler, or maybe even an Avid editing system, someday that gear is going to be obsolete, and that leaves you stranded, or possibly obsolete. This usually happens when the world decides something else is cooler or cheaper. Your choice at that point is you're out of a gig, or you have to figure out how to get your hands on the new toy, then figure out what buttons you need to know, how the menus operate, where you push, how you go about things. That takes a lot of time, and you have to get a lot of access. That's like me back then trying to work on a BMW motorcycle. So you can do that, and I know tons of people who've taken that path. But that path comes with a lot of hurdles. Like I said, you got to figure out how to get your hands on the new tech. Then you got to spend tons of time learning what each button does and how the menus work. And who's going to give you that equipment and you're not going to give them back a product? Usually doesn't happen in our business. So what's the better solution? Simple. Take the time now and learn a generic version of that device, like a camera or a sound sampler or a recording console or even a post-production software. If you understand the theory of those devices, then no matter what gets thrown at you, you can adjust quickly and learn how to create with it. Here's a trick I use all the time, and it works flawlessly. This is how I always figure out the theory of a new device. I base everything on signal flow. I mean everything. The way I think everything has a start, which is the source, an end, which is the output, and in between you have a signal path. Once you identify those three things, you're 80% ready to use it. Here's what I mean. Let's say a guitar and a bass amp. Simple, right? The guitar is the source, the amp is the output, and the signal flows from the guitar to the amp. That's it. Basic. All right, let's go a little further. Let's just look at the guitar. The pickups are the source, the 1/4-inch jack on the guitar is the output, and the internal wires that flow through the controls, signal flow. An amp breaks down the same way. The input jack on the amp is the source, the speaker jack is the output, and inside the amp, the signal path through all the circuits of tone, volume, effects, etc. is the signal path. You can keep going all the way down to the circuits on the components, which is what I ended up doing part of my career, because you just follow that path and you keep breaking everything down smaller and smaller. Okay, you don't get it, you don't know amps, you don't know guitars, cool. Let's talk about a camera. The input is the lens. The output is where the image gets recorded, an SD card, a tape, etc. The signal flow is all the features the camera has to offer. All right, you want to break that down further? Okay. Now let's just look at the lens. The output is the facing glass that is the input. What? The outward facing glass is the input. The output is where the lens connects to the camera. And the signal flow in a basic lens is through the several stages that an image has to go through. Focus, focal length, aperture, etc., etc. I use this signal flow concept to introduce myself to anything from a broadcast video switcher to a 48-channel audio recording console and a few times even a toaster at my house. This even works when I'm writing story or producing a show. The introduction, or the opening, is the source. The output is the conclusion or the show wrap-up. The signal flow is the journey I take my audience through. Oh yeah, this guy Shakespeare, he liked to call that a 3-act play. But 3-act play theory doesn't work when you're trying to set up a lighting console. See? That's what happens when you narrow it down to just operating a play. My method is way more versatile. I get asked hundreds of times, how am I able to jump from one area of production to another area of production so quickly and so efficiently? How did I learn how to operate so many different technology? The answer is simple. I just told you. They all possess the same basic elements: the source, the output, and the signal path. The next time you're faced with a complex problem in an area you've never been in, first, find out where it starts, the source. Then jump to the end, the output. Then follow the source until it makes its way to the end, the signal path. I'm telling you, this works every time, from hardware to software, from storytelling to solving your tax problems. Maybe leave the tax problems to your accountant. For some reason, all of us in production get in trouble with that. So you end up with simple: a beginning, an end, and an in-between. Simple, right? This is the end. Ciao, Joe Scacciaferro. Just saying.